are you? In Gaelic, if you speak to friends and relatives, then you can say Cimara ha u instead of Cimara ha shiv, because Cimara ha shiv is a little bit formal for people maybe that you don't know, or perhaps for your grandfather or someone that you want to be very polite with. Cimara ha shiv, and it's used for both men and women. Cimara ha u is the same. It's for both men and women. So, Fescar ma, Kidamela falcha, Cimara ha u. Is Misha a Joseph? Is Misha Joseph? I'm Joseph. Okay, so there we are. These are your first ever Gaelic words. Fescar ma, Kidamela falcha, Cimara ha u. Is Misha Joseph? And I'm going to be building on this every time that we meet so that we can get a good conversation going. The next thing that we want to talk about is small talk, because as you know, in any English-speaking environment, small talk is very, very important. And you have to know how to hold a conversation about nothing. Okay, so you meet your friend, and we'll go over this one more time. Fescar ma, for example, Kevin. Fescar ma, Kevin. Notice that in there. We always put the when we're talking to someone. Now, that can actually change the pronunciation of the person's name, because once you put the before a person's name, it creates a grammatical chain. It means that you have to put another letter after their first name. So, for example, if I said, is Misha Mary? And then you said, hello, Mary. And H would go in after the M. And then that changes to Vary. Is Misha Mary? Hello, Vary. Cimara ha u. This idea of limiting or putting an H in after certain letters, that there's a grammatical instruction for that, but we're not going to go into that now. So we're just going to stay with the English name Joseph, and it's going to be a Joseph. Hello, a Joseph. Cimara ha u. Cimara ha u. Or Fescar ma, Cimara ha u, Joseph. And I can say in response, Gleva. Very good. Or gu ma. You'll notice there, gu ma and gle va. And that va is caused by an H going in after the M. Don't worry too much about that for the moment, okay? Try to hear the sounds. What have we done so far? Fescar ma. Try to say after me. Fescar ma. Is Misha Joseph? Hello, a Joseph. Cimara ha u. Gle va or gu ma. Gle va means very good or very well. Gu ma means well or fine. Are you with me so far? Let's stop there for a moment and let's just recap on what we've said already. So we're on basic introductions. Fescar ma. Hello, Fesgar ma, Kimara hau, Clay va, Kimara hau, Clay va. And I'll try to write these in the show notes so that you have a better example of how they work. So, Fesgar ma, Kimara hau, Ismisha Joseph, Kida Milla Falcha, 100,000 welcomes. 100,000 welcomes. Gu to the podcast. Okay, 100,000 welcomes to my podcast. And we'll talk about what my podcast is in Gaelic another time. Okay, so we're over the worst part. Okay, we've done good afternoon. I'm going to say them in English now, and I want you to tell me if you can repeat them. Good afternoon. Fesgar ma. How are you? A formal version of how are you. Kimara hashiv. Let's try the informal version now. Kimara ha u. Kimara ha u. 100,000 welcomes to you. Ciad milla falcha. Ciad milla falcha. And when you say it fast, it sounds like Cida milla falcha. Ciad milla falcha. Ciad milla falcha. There we are. There's some phrases to get you going. And also, my name is Ismisha. Ismisha Joseph. Ismisha Joseph. And if you're repeating someone else's name, you would say, hello, and then the name. Hello, Joseph. And as I mentioned earlier, that can change the spelling of the person's name. So if they say, is Misha Mari? Hello, Vari. And the same happened with Gleva and Guma. Gleva, it means very good. Guma simply means good. So you can hear the sound changed there because an H was inserted after the first letter. That's called lenition, and it's one of the most complex bits of Gaelic grammar. And don't worry, because most Gaelic speakers don't do it properly because they never remember to do it, even if they're native speakers. So MH sound is V. Okay, and there's other things happen when you put the letter H in. After other letters, it can change the sound completely. So there we are. That's our Gaelic for today. I hope you found this useful. And we're just going to go over it again and again to make sure you've got it right. So, hello, Kidamila Falcha Gu Alaba. Hello, 100,000 welcomes to Scotland. Hello, Kida milla falcha gu alaba. Is Misha Joseph. Falcha gu. And then I'm going to say in English at the moment, my podcast. Falcha gu, my podcast. Fesker ma. Kimera hau. Gle va, very good, or gu ma. And the other things we touched on is when you say a person's name, you put a before it, and that in turn changes the sound in some letters, not all of them. So is Mishamari, hello Avari. But with English names, they stay the same, of course. Is Misha Joseph, hello a Joseph. We'll look more at names maybe another time. Well, I hope you found this helpful, and I hope this is a lovely introduction for Gaelic. I'll be back again soon with another short podcast, just to go over what we've done already and to help you. So, goodbye for now. Chiri and Drazda. Ciad mille falcha gu podcast acum is Misha Joseph. Kimmer hau and Jew. Matinva agus feskerma agus ciad mille falcha. Well, that's all the Gaelic that we learnt in the last podcast. Ha Gaelic acum, I speak Gaelic. In Gaelic, we don't say that we have anything, we say that thing is at me. For example, podcast acum, my podcast. More and more Gaelic speakers, though, are using the pronouns as in English, mo for my. In Gaelic, historically, we only used those pronouns for parts of the body or for a family member. Mo vac, my son, for example. As you might know, as I told you last time, mac is the word for son. If you put mo in front of it, lenition takes place, which means that an extra H is added after the first letter. So mac becomes MHAC, which is pronounced vac, movac. Generally speaking, though, everything around you which you have, like a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, is going to be at you in Gaelic. Acum, at me. Acit, at you. In today's lesson, we're going to be talking about the weather. In order to do that, we first must again just quickly touch upon the verb to be. To say it is, we say ha-i, ha-i. For example, ha-i fuair, it's cold. Ha-i pla, it's warm. Ha-i fluch, it's wet. Hai churum, it's dry. Hai doraka, it's dark. And the list is endless. There's all kinds of adjectives and all kinds of ways that you can describe the weather. The same really as in English. So I'd like you to buy a Gaelic dictionary, or if you go to a website like learngaelic.scot, you'll be able to see one. And you'll also be able to see some of the things that we've been learning today. As I recall, they have a section on weather. So, hai, it is. Hai fuor, it is cold. Hai pla, it is warm. Hai fluch, it's wet. Hai churum, it's dry. Hai doraka, it's dark. Ha e. So there we are. That's how we say it is in Gaelic. If you remember our last lesson, we spoke about glé, va. Glé, va. Hami guma, I am fine. Hami glé va, with the extra H, I'm very good. And this word glé, we can insert for the weather as well. For example, ha e glé uer. Now we said ha e fuer, but remember with glé, it puts the extra H in. And when it does that, it becomes silent. So that means ha e fuer becomes ha e glé uer. And this can be very confusing for a new speaker. It's also the same to say ha e glé va. Ha e glé va. So we started off with ha e pla, and now it's ha e glé vla. Vla. Because once you put the H after the B, it has a V sound. I know that this all sounds very confusing just at the moment, so let's just recap again on what we've been talking about. So, we started off by using the weather. And what we're saying is that if you want to emphasize something by using the word very, you use the word glé. Glé. But in Gaelic, some words, they cause lenition, and that means that an extra H is inserted. And when that happens, it changes the pronunciation of the word. So ha e fuer becomes ha e glé uer. So let's build a little bit on top of what we know already. Okay, so Ciad milla fulcha. Fulcha gu podcast acum. Cymra hau and Jew. Hami glé va. Hai fuer agus churum. and Jew. Hai gle uer, gle uer. Vai, it was. Vai, pla. Vai, gle, vla, vla. Now let's just go over this again briefly. Okay, so glay brings in this extra H. And when it brings in the extra H, it changes the pronunciation. Fuer becomes uer, the FH is silent in Gaelic, and bla becomes vla. Hami, I am, or va, it was. So, vami is I was. Hami, I am. Vami, I was. Hai, it is. Vai, it was. Okay, so I'm going to say a few things, and I want you to try to either answer or to repeat. Okay, so ha I fuer, ha I fuer. So remember, there's no yes or no in Gaelic. We simply have to affirm what's been said already. Ha I fuer, oh ha, ha I fuer. Va I fuer, ha, or va I fuer. Okay, now it's your turn. Ha I fuer. Va I fuer. Kimera ha u. Repeat after me. Ciad mille fulcha. Podcast acum. Ha I fuer. Ha I gle uer. Vami fluch. Vami fluch. Vami pla. Vami pla. Vami gle vla. Vami gle vla. Kurstmaha. Right then. Kurstmaha. That's all for today. So, cheery and drasda. Gle ur in Jew. Gle ur and an alaba. Hami alabanach. Hami alabanach. Hami alabanach. Hashiv Americanach. Americanach. Vami in Boston and 2001. Va e chirum. Va e chirum. I guess fuer. Well, I guess pla. I guess pla. The word for big in Gaelic is more. More. if you think of more, you've more or less got it. More. And the word for little is bic. Bic. So, for example, there's a radio show on Radio na Gael, and it's called Big Mary. Big Mary. So that would be Vari Vor, Big Mary. She would say, is Misha Mary? But if I met her, I would say, hello, Avari, because of the lenition process. And also because of the lenition process, the adjective big also takes the H. So Big Mary becomes Vari Vor. Vari Vor. Big Mary. I'm afraid Gaelic isn't very politically correct. So you hear people being referred to by their size rather than maybe by their name. Big Mary on the radio is one of those things. That's a bit of a shock for English culture and probably for American culture as well. There was one lady I remember called Mary Vor nan Oren. Now I'm saying her name is Mary Vor, okay, rather than Vari Vor, because this lady died many years ago. Okay, she's something from history. She was a famous Gaelic singer. Oran means song, and on the internet, if you put in Oran Mor, Glasgow, you'll see a lovely, beautiful restaurant and cafe and theatre called Oran Mor. Anyway, Mary Vor was a Scottish Gaelic poet from the Isle of Skye, and she died in 1898. So try googling Mary Vor nan Oren and see what you find. Or maybe on the radio show, if you try Vari Vor Radio na Gael, you can see that she really is big. Okay, let's move on, because I want to talk to you about the verb to be. Now, I've already told you that it's a little bit different if you're talking about identity, but the verb to be type things. Hami, I am. It can also be as Misha if you're talking about a name. But let's just stay with Hami for a moment. Hami. Hami fuhr. I'm cold. Ha fuhr. Is he and it. Ha fuhr. Ha fuhr. Ha fuhr. It's cold. It's cold. And then we move on, and we have you. Ha fuhr. Ha fuhr. You are cold. Ha fuhr. We are cold. Or if you wanted to say we're a small family, you could say Hashin Beck. Hashin Beck. We're small. Hashin more. We're big. Or you could say the children. Ha ate. They are big. Ha ate more. Or ha ate Beck. Takes a little while to remember. Two things I want to tell you, because I don't think this has been clear, but now the time's to clarify it. Ha he or it, and ha is she. Now, because of the way we pronounce things and pronounce them quickly, I'm sure you'll hear some variations of that, but it's very important that you try to remember and he and she. Ha e fuhr, it is cold. Ha I fuhr, she is cold. And you can expect to hear some different ideas of that. Now, you plural is shiv. This is a very interesting point. Let me explain. Okay. In Gaelic, you plural is always used if we're addressing a singular person. Now, let me explain. It's not actually that complicated. I'm going to give you an English example. So the Queen, she doesn't say, I'm cold. She says, we are cold, because it's the Queen. And she also says things like, we are not amused. She's using the we there instead of I, because it's more polite. And in Old English and in Gaelic, that was always the way. You didn't use the I, okay, or you used the you differently. It's different now, okay, of course, but in Gaelic it's still very important. So you plural is actually shiv. So when you say Kimara Hashiv, you're actually saying, how are you all? At the start of this podcast, I said, Kimara Hashiv, Kevin is Heather. How are you both? That's really what it means, or how are you all? Because there's two of you there. Yeah? So my point is that Kimara Hashiv, it is more polite, but its physical meaning is how are you all? It's plural, to address one person. I hope I've made that clear. Let me just quickly explain it again. Shiv is plural. We use it to address one person in very polite situations. Kimara Hashiv is how are you all? When it's easier simply to say Kimara Hau. Okay? But if there really is more than one person, it's Kimara Hashiv. So Kimara Hashiv, Heather is Kevin, or Kevin is Heather. And there we have it. I hope that's made it a little bit clear. Now I want Gaelic and Alaba. Gaelic in Scotland. So, Hami Albanach, Hashiv Americanach, or Americanach. It's up to you where you want to put the stress. Okay. So, you know, my grandparents were Gaels. My family came from a little island called Islay, which is a long way away. They didn't come from Islay themselves. It was actually their great-grandparents who came from Islay. My grandmother was Irish as well, so she had a bit of Irish Gaelic. Now, I need to tell you something at this point. Gaelic during the 1980s and 1990s was not very fashionable. In fact, it was very heavily suppressed. I would have been ashamed to tell anyone I spoke Gaelic or knew Gaelic, and it was something I kept hidden. If I spoke Gaelic at school, I would have been punished a lot. So I didn't. But when the Scottish government came to power, they wanted to try to revive it, because there were many people like me around who knew Gaelic from their parents or grandparents, but couldn't speak it or couldn't write it or didn't want to speak it, for example. Around the Isles today, there's still a lot of Gaelic speakers, but there's no people left who only have Gaelic. It's incredibly sad. More people speak Gaelic in Canada than they do in Scotland. Interesting thing to study, and people are working very hard to bring it back. The Scottish Parliament has passed many laws to ensure that companies and road signs are in Gaelic. But because Gaelic is associated with Irish Gaelic, which is associated with Catholicism, people here are still a little bit uncomfortable with it, especially in Northern Ireland, Because if you speak Gaelic, you're more or less advertising the fact that you're Catholic, and that can get you into big trouble in some places. I'm pleased to say that times have changed. Gaelic now is more of a secular thing, but there was a time when really it was making a bigger statement than just Gaelic. Especially since most of us on the west coast of Scotland have Gaelic speaking Irish grandparents, or non-Gaelic speaking Northern Irish grandparents. I'll tell you more about that another time. So, let's get back to some Gaelic. I already told you, Vamian in Boston, 2001. Ha Boston Bria, I guess Chirum, I guess Blah. Hammy more, I'm fat, okay, and that's the truth. Avilio, Beck. And my mother, Va-E, Beck, she was small. My father, Va-E-more. Now these pronouns we haven't really spoken about, okay? We'll keep going over them because I think in my pronunciations on WhatsApp, it all sounds like E, but it's actually E. The good thing about making these YouTube clips is I'm also learning, because my Gaelic is okay, but because I don't get the chance to talk it very often, after all, I'm living with a Spanish or Venezuelan man, it's very good for me to refresh as well. The best way to practice is to listen to Radio na Gael and try to repeat what you hear. Okay, so let's just do a few more Gaelic phrases quickly before we finish. Ha mi furin ju, ha e fluch. Va I bec, va e mor. Monien. Remember, where does the verb go? So monien is what? Can you remember? And where would the verb be? The verb would be at the beginning, ha. Ha monien. And then you would have bec. Now, I'm not talking about lenition yet. When I explain the rules about how the sounds change with the H, okay, you'll know more about how pronunciation changes, but that's a little bit complex. So I want to keep it simple with stuff that you already know. So I hope that makes things a little bit clear. That's the verb to be. Hami, ha-u, ha-e, ha-i, ha-shin, ha-shiv, and ha-iet. So ha-shiv, Kevin, is Heather. I hope I got the name right, by the way. I hope it is Heather. I'm sure you told me that, Kevin, before. Anyway, there we are. So, Chiri and Drazda. Hello, Kimera Hashiv is Misha Joseph and an Alaba. Hami Fuhr agus Fluch and an Alaba and you. The weather here is very bad. Feskerma agus Matin va Falcha gu podcast acum. Falcha gu learn Gaelic. Hami ha-u, ha-e, ha-i, ha-shin, ha-shiv, ha-iet. In Gaelic, the word for town is Valla, Valla. Now, you hear it sounds like a V sound there because of lenition. Avala or Bala. Vamian Zavala Akum and Jew. Now, I think we should know what Vala Akum means. My town. Vamian Zavala Akum and Jew. I was in my town today. Vamian Zavala Akum and Jew. Va e fuhr agus fluch. Listen again. Vamian Zavala Akum and Jew. I was in my town today. Va e fluch. It was wet. These last few lessons we've been making very simple sentences with the verb to be. For example, ha mi pla va iet fuhr va shiv fluch. These are very simple and very useful sentences. But what if perhaps you want to say something a little bit longer? Is it possible just to, for example, insert a word instead of it? Well, unfortunately, the answer is no, as you would expect. Let me explain. Let's take one sentence. Ha icha bria. Ha icha bria. Or we could say ha la bria, for example. So in this case, all we've done is we've replaced with a word. So for example, ha bria, okay, is fine. But is it okay just to say something like Hala bria? Is the day beautiful? And of course, translated, it's the day is beautiful, not is the day beautiful. But the literal translation is the day beautiful, because is in Gaelic comes first. So hala bria, ha bria, hala bria. Well, you probably think that yes, you can do that, and you will see this written sometimes in some grammar books, but it's only written that way to try to help you to understand basic sentences. The truth of the matter, however, is not quite so nice. Let me explain. First of all, the word la, L-A-T-H-A, means the day. It's pronounced la, and sometimes you can even see it written as L-A, la. Okay, so ha la bria should have an at the end. A-N-N. Ha la bria an. Ha la fuhr an. And I know what you're going to ask. You're going to ask, why do we need an at the end? Because if you can say ha-i fuhr, ha-e-fuhr, I should say, it is cold, why can't you just say ha-la fuhr? Why does it have to be Halafur an? And it's a very good question. I'm going to try to explain. In Gaelic, an, well, it has a few meanings. It can mean in, but ANN at the end of a word is there, how can I say, is to create some kind of existential moment, to state that something exists. Okay? There isn't really any English translation of this, except perhaps when you're talking about the weather, you might say, oh, the day is cold, isn't it? Is some kind of affirmative phrase for yourself and for other people. An is something very, very similar, but it doesn't mean isn't it? It actually means in itself. So it's a kind of a reflexive. The day is cold in itself, isn't it? Which fits very well if you consider the way Gaelic people speak. For example, Cimara Hashiv Féin, how are you yourself? So it should come as no surprise when we say the day is cold in itself, isn't it? It's just what we say. I'm afraid there's no other reason for that, but you will hear it. It is correct, but some people don't always use it. So, Halabria an. Halabria an is day, beautiful in itself. It's important to remember that this an changes. If an means in itself, it also can become in herself, in myself, and other things too. But let's just worry about an for the moment in itself. Ha icha vria an. You can also hear the lenition there because H has been put in. Let's try a few more of these to see if you can remember how to use it. Halafur an. Halafluch an. Halapla an. So, halabrio an. Halasnog an. Halamath an. Halama an. So TH is silent. Remember gleva? Okay, so it's ma, not math. Okay. So that takes us to where we use an at the end. So I hope you've enjoyed that. It's not actually as complicated as it sounds. It just sounds difficult, you know, but it's really not so bad. So we spent a lot of time saying what is, but how do we say the negative? Well, it's very simple actually. The negative simply is chaniel. 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 But you might notice from these examples that chaniel is followed by the definite article, which is sometimes abbreviated, and it also causes lenition sometimes. So, for example, Chaniel amatin va. Chaniel amatin va. It isn't such a bad day. Chaniel amatin va. It isn't a bad day. Literally, it isn't a bad day. Chanel a matin va. Let's try another one. Chanel an la snog. Chanel an la snog. What could that be, do you think? So Chanel, it isn't. And la, day. Snog, lovely. It isn't a lovely day. Chanel. And it's a very easy thing to say, but just remember to put the article in, because, for example, ha la brio an, la has no article, but Chanel an la. Chanel an la snog. Let's try another one. Chanel la ma ananju. Okay. Now I'm going to add something else in here. Chanel la cho ma anju. Okay, so Chanel la, so it isn't day, ma, good, and in itself, today. Okay, now this is really interesting because the cho in there, the CHO, means such. Okay, so Chanel la choma ananju. Now, if the cho wasn't there, the lenition rules may well apply. Chanel la va ananju. And what we'll do is we'll make sure that we spend some time on lenition, just so that you're very clear on what triggers it and how it works. But right now, we're just focusing in on some phrases. Okay, so the difference between the positive and the negative is the negative shan, chan, yel takes the article. Okay, so Chanel an la snog, but hala snog an. And the very obvious question there is, does Chanel also take an? And the answer is yes, it does. Okay, so if you're making the sentence out of the positive, which has an, then you would also put it in the negative. Okay, so it's very interesting. So two things to remember there. One is the lenition, and the other is an in itself. Well, that's all from me for today. So until next time, Chiri and Razda. Matin va fescar ma agus Ciad Mille Fulcha. Fulcha gu learning Scottish Gaelic le Joseph. With Joseph. Le Joseph. Hami an alaba. Heather is Kevin. Ha iad an America. Ha iad Iansachach Gaelic. Ha iad Iansachach Gaelic. They are learning Gaelic. Vami ac oper. Ac an tai. Ha tai ur acum. I've been working at home. I have a new home. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and 100,000 welcomes to you to the podcast Learn Gaelic. My name is Joseph. Heather and Kevin are in America and they are learning Gaelic. Ha iad Iansachach Gaelic. Whenever we say we're doing anything in Gaelic, we always use the continuous a working, a doing, a playing, and we put a in the front as we mentioned before. So hami ag oper, hami ag ober, I'm working. Ag and tie at home. I'm working at home. Now, there's a few new words there for you. Tai ur is something I mentioned earlier, and that means new home. Ur, new. Ha iad ag iansachach. And again, it's with the a, and it means they are learning. Now, there's a little difference in the writing between, for example, adol, or which is going, or ag oper, or agiansachach, because one is with a and one is with a g. Don't worry about that just yet. We'll deal with that when we have to, because today we're going to talk about lenition. Now, just before we do that, let's just have a little recap of what we've done so far. Ha fuur, ha vlug, ha fuur, ha vlug, ha sin fuur, ha iad fuur, ha shiv fuur, ha fuur. And that's the verb to be. We've already spoken about how to make short sentences. Ha la fuur an. The day it's cold in itself. Ha la fuur an. Ha fuur. And we've already said that we put an at the end to create in itself. So, for example, the day is cold in itself. Ha la fuur an. And we've also done the negative, which is chanail. Chan yale. Chanyel. Okay, so you could say chanyel la the fuur. The day isn't cold. The day isn't cold. We've already said that if you have something, it's at you. So, for example, ha tai urakum. The new house is at me. I have a new home. Or if you want to say I'm in my house, you can simply say hami agentai akum. I'm in my house. I'm in my house. These are just short and quick sentences in Gaelic. So let me just repeat again what I said at the beginning. Matin va agus fesker ma. Cead milla filcha. Q learn Gaelic le Joseph. Is Misha Joseph? Hami an alaba. Heather is Kevin. Ha iad Iansachach Gaelic. Ha iad an America. An America. Now you'll notice that in the beginning I said Fesker ma agus matin va. Good morning and good afternoon. So Heather and Kevin, I didn't use agus, I used is. Heather is Kevin. And that's because when things go together, and you can decide what goes together, like salt and pepper, cat and dog, husband and wife, when two things which seem to be related to each other are together, you can say is, like brother and sister, for example, mother and father. Okay, Kevin is Heather. Kevin is Heather. You can use agus. Sometimes people don't know what to use because they don't really know how to use it, but poetically it sounds nicer. Heather is Kevin. Kevin is Heather. Kevin agus Heather. Now today we need to talk about lenition. Now we already know, at least we kind of know, what lenition is. And that is when some words force an extra letter on another word, which changes its sound. Now, this is just a basic introduction to lenition, okay? It's not the full text because lenition is quite complex. But we're just going to start with this to get you, or to give you an understanding. Okay, so lenition is a process whereby certain consonants appear at the beginning of words. They're made softer. This happens by adding an H after the first consonant in a word. Okay, now there's a different system for vowels which we'll do separately, but basically an H is inserted. So ha e fuer, ha e gle ur, and you can see that the H is inserted there, so the spelling is no longer F-U-A-R, it's F-H-U-A-R, and we discussed this last time. It's the same with Mari. Hello is Misha Mari. Hello a Vari. And lenition happens when certain words appear before other words. Gle causes lenition. A causes lenition. And there's many other rules about it. Okay, so it actually only happens with 9 consonants. It doesn't happen with all of them. Okay, so I suppose that's a really good place to start to explain which ones it happens with. Well, it happens with B, C, D, F, G, M, P, S, and T. B, C, D, F, G, M, P, S, and T. Okay, the rest, it really doesn't matter. And I don't recommend you try learning this because it'll get very complex and you'll be crazy in a few minutes. So I would say just watch out when you're speaking or reading just to see where they turn up. All right. The second thing you need to know is they tend to be more related to masculine words than feminine. Okay, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So, for example, we know already that FH is silent, so fur becomes gle ur. Okay. P, when it takes the H, becomes f. Becomes an F sound. D, when it takes the H, takes a kind of ch, somewhere between a D and a G. So, for example, dunya, husband, becomes chunya. Okay, and it basically goes on and on. So, I don't want to cover all the sounds right now. I just want to introduce you to the concept of the thing. Okay. Each sound is different. Okay, so of course the FH becomes silent. The TH, it just takes the H. Okay, so for example, it's just an example. Okay, you don't need to remember this. Tower house would be tour high, because tour, tower, lenite tie, which is house or home. Okay, so it's not tour tie, it takes the H and it becomes tour tie. Okay, there's other examples as well, which maybe I can I can tell you. If you want an extension built to your house or an annex, it's called a high. Okay, so it looks like ath thigh, but it's a thigh. So the th is silent in the first part of the word and also in the second. All right, so that gives you just a little idea of how much the sounds can change with lenition. And it gets very complex. So gleva, gle-ur, the B sound, when it takes the H, becomes V, the same as the MH. So we had Svari earlier was the example. Vata is a good one, which is basically a small boat. Vata. You've got to be careful with that, though. It has other meanings as well. But Vata would be a boat, and you can hear it has the V sound as well. Okay, so Bata, Vata. And just before we finish on that, a note about gender. So if I say, for example, cat, acum, I have a cat, you can use that other way of using possessives if it's something which is very close to you, like a family member. So you could say Mo, and the way you say her cat or his cat is a. And that a is pronounced very short, a, and it's silent before vowels and the lenition of FH. So again, don't try to remember this because it'll drive you absolutely crazy. Just accept it, and as we come across it, we'll practice it, because I think we'll be talking a lot about lenition in the future. But what I want to tell you right now is that, for example, a cat, okay, means her cat, but it lenites in the masculine. It becomes a chat in the masculine. I suppose there's a couple of reasons for this. It'll lenite in the masculine as a way of letting you know it's masculine, because if a is the same for her and his, it's one way of letting you know if it's masculine or feminine. But the other reason why it lenites is to make it softer, like the rest of the lenition rules. And lenition is like that. It tends a little bit to gear towards the masculine. And we'll talk more about that when we get more into lenition. But anyway, this has been an introduction about lenition, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. That's all really I wanted to say today. So, Hamiadol, Ak and Tayakam. Shirian Drasta. Hello. Matin va agis fesker ma. Kied millefalcha Q podcast Acum. Learn Gaelic le Joseph. Is Misha Joseph?